with President Trump, he's not even to the first 100 days, and he's probably done more in 1 week than all presidents have done in all their lifetimes. I mean, he is shaking it up. So our special guest today is one of the most popular guests, is Bert Dohmen, fellow Hawaiian, founder of Dohmen Capital Research. He's a professional trader and investor. He's always well sought after on most of the financial publications and networks for his vision on the markets. And today he is going to be talking about what he sees. What does his crystal ball see that the new President Trump will mean to you and me and our money? And by the way, my sweetheart Kim is off today. So welcome to the program, Bert.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be with you this morning.
So what do you think about my introduction? We have this guy, President Donald Trump, and I'm not, he's a friend of mine, but I'm a little concerned. How are you doing?
Well, I'm concerned about a lot of things. I mean, I've been saying that for the last year, not just since the election. For the last year, I said, this is like walking on the eggs, hoping that the eggshells will not break. The world is so fragile. And incredibly now, of course, the central banks have someone to blame for all the problems when things start going wrong. And, the new president will get all the blame. My view is that his administration will be sabotaged from A to Z. He's destined to fail. And we even had the billionaire hedge fund manager say that in an interview from Davos, was on Bloomberg, and he said, I want Trump to fail. For someone who's made billions of dollars in the United States, that's an amazing statement. He's an immigrant, and he wants the president to fail. So this is all-out war now against a person who really wants to drain the swamp. That swamp has been so successful for the establishment, the well-connected people, and the rest of us, the stupid taxpayers, are the ones that have suffered.
Why would somebody want Trump, our president, to fail?
Well, it's a great game. Look at, how everything has been fixed so that the best connected people in Washington have made the billions of dollars for themselves, and everybody else pays for it. Look at this policy of zero interest rates. Who has that benefit and who has it hurt the most? It's hurt the most all the retired people in the United States that have worked their butts off all their lives, and suddenly they get 0% interest on their money market funds. They have been hurt tremendously. And who has been helped? The guys who caused the last crisis, all the big financial companies. They caused this last crisis with all the paper confetti that they manufactured. They paid off the rating agencies to give them AAA ratings on this garbage, and they sold it around the world, and that finally imploded. And these are the guys that have benefited the most the past 7 years.
So
the game is rigged. It's rigged. Here's a guy who says, I'm going to change that.
Yeah, so that's my question. Do you believe, like I believe, that Donald Trump really wants to change the corruption or the political eliteness and the ripping and the kleptocracy of not only America but the world right now? I mean, the casino is wide open, and the middle class and poor are getting wiped out.
Yeah, isn't it amazing here? And if we see that he's already keeping his promises, this is so unusual for a politician to actually keep his promises. People aren't used to it, and to say, my God, he's actually doing what he said he would do? That's amazing. And now, of course, the war, this is not a popular uprising. What you do have here is people who don't have the facts. Like this morning, we wake up, the stock market is down a couple of 100 points on the Dow and so on. Turn on TV, and guests on financial TV are saying, ban on immigration. This is not a ban on immigration. I said, did I miss something? Did something change overnight? And suddenly a ban on temporary, it's actually temporary suspension for 3 months from people from countries that are very difficult to vet because they don't have a system like in Syria where you can find out who are these people that are coming into the country. So he says, let's stop them from coming into the country until we find a better way to find out who they are.
Right.
That's all that he's saying. So suddenly on TV it's being portrayed as a ban on immigration. This is stupid. You cannot go. If you go from the United States into Mexico without a visa, okay, and they catch you, you will be arrested. You will be sent to prison for a couple of years, unless you bribe somebody, okay? And there's no but about it. Nobody complains about it. Every other country has very, very strict rules about who comes in and the paperwork that you need to come in. And the United States is supposed to have no borders.
My concern here is this, though. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. And the reason I wanted to talk to you today is how is the upset with Trump going to play out in markets, in stock market, real estate market, bond markets, and money markets?
If you really want to take the approach and say, okay, the game is rigged from A to Z, and, I've been saying that since even before the election, because I thought Trump would win the election. It was obvious he was getting 20,000, 30,000 people going to his speeches. People would stand in line all day long just to hear him talk. And his opposition, this woman, she would get 200 to 300 people. So it was absolutely clear that the polls were totally false and falsified on purpose, and that he was going to win. It was obvious. That was a no-brainer. But I said all the time, if he does win, he is going to be sabotaged from A to Z, because the game has been so rigged, and all the big money people are on the same side of the fence, and their game is going to be interrupted, because now it's, the slogan is America first. It's really Americans first. And that is very unusual. And the people who have been dining at the trough in Washington, D.C., are going to have their game interrupted. And nobody's going to let billions and billions of dollars of profits just disappear. The important thing to figure out is who's going to be more powerful. And I think that this group of people are going to be more powerful than the president.
Wow. Once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Our special guest today is one of the favorites of our programs, is Bert Dohmen. Bert is the founder of Dohmen Capital Research, a professional trader investor. His website is dohmencapital.com, author of Prelude to a Meltdown, The Coming China Crisis. And the reason we have Bert on is he sees, and everybody sees the world from their, should I say, window on the world. And Bert, for the last 30 years, has been watching the window of the world, through the stock market, and his forecasts are uncannily accurate. He doesn't actually hit the exact dates, but he can tell you what's going to happen, more importantly, why it's going to happen. So today we're talking about what's going to happen now that our new President Trump, and again, he's a friend of mine personally, but I'm not a Republican or Democrat. I'm watching carefully also. There's some, the stock market went past 20,000, or the Dow went past 20,000. That's why I want Bert on this program, because it's exactly as he said, the economy is more fragile than ever, yet I believe there are some people who think times are going to get better because of Trump. And Bert is saying something I've been saying. I think people want to bring him down. And the way they bring him down is have the markets fail, which will make the rest of us fail. So that's my personal concern. So, Bert, before we go to a break, any comments of that? You're saying they think people want him to fail so they can go back to just, dining at the trough. They don't want the trough drained. They want the trough to be filled up, right?
Exactly. And, I could say many other things that I really don't want to say in an interview, but there's so much evidence here of, what has happened to people who want to change the system. So, I'm asked, for example, on a financial network interview last week, I was asked about, what I thought was going to happen with corporate earnings, and said, my view, corporate earnings are really irrelevant. It's a smokescreen, okay? Because first of all, when you hear earnings of companies, they only tell you what the earnings are compared to Wall Street estimates. Wall Street makes the estimates. So these estimates are intentionally low so that they're easy to beat, so that they can say on a TV screen, 70% of the companies reported have beat estimates. Well, estimates are totally irrelevant. These are the guys in Wall Street that are fabricating them. Why don't they ever tell the people what the earnings are compared to the earnings a year ago? Then we can see if earnings are improving or if they're deteriorating. That is a much more important number. And I suggested to this financial network, why don't you be the first ones to actually report the year-ago numbers as well so that viewers can judge? They don't want you to know that.
What did he say, or she say, the financial network?
Well, the people that do the interviewing have no idea what earnings are even. They don't know if they're the GAAP earnings or if they're trailing earnings or if they're operating earnings. There's so many different types of earnings. Right. You have to know, but they never even tell you what the earnings are that they report,
So how can Trump be sabotaged, or what do you think they're going to do? You have any idea on that really quickly?
Well, yes, I write about it in the Wellington letter that is coming out this week. I write exactly about that. I said, if I were the opposition and wanted him to fail, and I was very astute in the markets, and I have made billions of dollars, let's say, in the markets as the person who's coordinating all this has done, it's very easy to make Trump fail and to make it appear that his policies are totally rejected. So the first thing is you crank the U.S. dollar up. The U.S. dollar value continues to rise until the external debt of emerging countries becomes so high in their local currency terms that there will be emerging markets at default.
Our guest today is a very popular guest. He's Bert Dohmen. He's a founder of Dohmen Capital Research. He is a professional trader and investor. He is an author or editor of or producer of the Wellington letter. It is one of the most informative letters I subscribe to, and I subscribe to a number of them, but I look to the Wellington letter more than any other ones. And Bert's website is dohmencapital.com if you want to subscribe to his newsletter. I highly suggest it, especially at this time when everything is going upside down. And today we're discussing what's going to happen with President Trump. Will anything change as he turns the world upside down and shakes it by the ankles and flushes out the good actors and some of the bad actors also? And our question is, what's it mean to you? What are you going to do? How are you going to prepare for the Trump presidency? He'll probably be with us for 4 years, unless he's impeached or something. But we're talking about, with Bert Dohmen, how President Trump will be sabotaged. And if he's sabotaged because he's trying to drain the swamp of all the corruption that has infested all governments of the world, but more especially the U.S. government, what are you going to do? And what are some of the possible ways our president may be sabotaged? So I first start with that question, Bert. How are some of the ways President Trump can be sabotaged right now?
Yes, we discussed the one way is by pushing the value of the dollar up, and that can be done through interest rate policy. The central banks, of course, this is where everything comes together. If you want to rule the world, if you want to make a policy everywhere and so on, you just control countries' money. Somebody said this, 100 some years ago. He said, I think it was one of the Rothschilds, give me control over a country's money, and I can.
I care not who makes the rules.
Yeah.
I care not who makes the rules. Just give me control of the country's money, and that's what the Federal Reserve Bank is.
Exactly, and the central banks. If you look at who's behind all the central banks in the world, the same names come up. Okay, and so this is what it's all about. It's so easy for central banks right now to crank up interest rates, especially in the Federal Reserve, that will make the dollar strong. The cover story behind higher interest rates will be, we have to fight inflation. Okay, so that means that the inflation numbers will start rising faster than most people expect. Okay, so this opens up a whole new ballgame. It'll be like 1978. I started the Wellington letter in January of 1977, so this is our 40th year in business. And so over 40 years, you're bound to learn a little bit when you look at the markets for 40 years. Actually, I've been trading the markets for over 50 years for myself. We don't manage money, and so we can take a very objective view. But that the central banks now start reducing their balance sheet, as it's called. That means that all of the money that they created, which has been $21 trillion, if you take all the central banks of the world together, of artificial credit they have created over the last 7 years, 21 trillion with a T. This is huge. It has never been done before in the history of the world. So if they start now reducing this stimulus, letting the governmental securities that they bought, letting them just mature and without reinvesting that into new securities, then that will be an effective tightening of credit. And if you want to create a recession, if you want to make the leader of a country look bad, this is exactly what you do. You create a recession and a big bear market in stocks and so on, and the administration will be discredited.
But
it's going to happen. But this is one way that it can be done.
But also, when you strengthen the U.S. dollar, countries that hold debt in dollars cannot pay the dollar back, right? The debt back, and the more they try, the poorer the other country gets, like Ecuador or whoever's borrowed from us. They're going to struggle with a strong U.S. dollar. I mean, they can't. Yeah, they can't pay it back.
I was saying in the first segment. This is what happens. Most of the external debt of these emerging countries is denominated in U.S. dollars. So if the dollar value rises, in effect, their debt, the amount of their debt rises in terms of their own local currency, and then becomes much more difficult.
So since Rich Dad Radio is a global has a global reach and all this, for those of you listening, you may want to consider, if let's say you live in Bolivia and you owe the U.S. money, that means your economy gets weaker. Is that correct, Bert?
Yes. Because the debt burden gets so much bigger. And so this is a big problem if the dollar starts getting stronger.
So what does the average person do? I guess the answer would be depends on what country you live in.
The average person right now is totally helpless. Even most professionals that you see on TV are totally without a clue. You have to look at this so closely. I remember when in 1978, this was a year after I started. I started the Wellington Letter in January of 77 because only 3.8%, so less than 4% of the investment advisors were bearish. And I said, I see all the signs that a bear market is right around the corner, and I want to get this in writing. So I wrote the first issue of the Wellington Letter and sent it to the media and so on. The Wall Street Journal picked it up. And they couldn't find any other bear, I guess, and they had the whole Word on the Street column, which is the most popular column in the Wall Street Journal, about my bearish forecast and why. I said in there, we're going to have a bear market. 15 months later, the head of the Federal Reserve was relieved of duties, and they nominated a new one. And the first thing that he said is we're going to fight inflation because inflation was starting to rise, not with tight money, but with higher interest rates. And I said, that's it. That is a signal for a big stock market up move, and especially an up move in gold and silver prices. Because it means inflation is going to go rampant, and stocks will become an inflation hedge. Wall Street had never even considered that stocks could become an inflation hedge. And I said, yes, it's natural, because if you have plenty of money, people will be able to pay higher prices for goods because they can get loans and so on. And stocks will become actually an inflation hedge because companies can raise prices. And that's exactly what happened over the next 2 years.
So once again, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking to Bert Dohmen. Can we do anything? Has anything changed? I'll give you a little bit of tidbit information here, just FYI. What's going on in the world. In 1990 in America, there were 37 major banks. So in 1990, there were 37 major banks. By 2000, it was down to 17. And by 2017, this year, they're down to 4. So I don't really know what that means, but it means that the rich are getting richer. The thing I always say on the Rich Dad Radio Show is people don't talk about saving the poor anymore. They talk about saving the middle class because the poor are toast. But it's really time to pay attention because you're not getting the news on the news. every time I watch the news, I just get disgusted because I kind of know we're being lied to. For example, they're now trying to discredit President Trump by saying the Russians got him in. They said, the Russians hacked the system, and, without the Russians hacking, Hillary would have won, and yada, 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 yada. But the facts are that we hack everybody. They interviewed Obama, and somebody asked him, well, does the United States hack Russia? And Obama says, no, we don't. Now, if you can believe that, how can you believe that? So my question to Bert is this. If they can hack our election system, can they hack the stock market or disrupt it?
Of course. The stock market has been manipulated for decades, and we've always said that, but it's never been as rampant as since 2007. At that time, the SEC rescinded the uptick rule, which had been in effect, I think, since 1933. Can you believe it? And this was put in by Joe Kennedy. They made him head of the Federal Reserve at that time, of the SEC, and he knew what would stop the short selling depressing stock market prices. And he said, because he did it in 1929. So he started the uptick rule, and that basically means that you can only sell stock short if the prior trade was on an uptick, was at a higher price than the one before. So in other words, you cannot just keep on short selling and push prices down. And that was a very effective rule. In 2007, just without any fanfare, without much publicity, they rescinded that rule. I said, why? Something is going to happen in the markets. If they want to prevent the short selling from knocking the market down, and now they eliminate that rule, something is up. And then we saw it a year later what was up. It was one of the biggest crashes since 1929. So when things like this happen without much fanfare, without explanation, you know that something is being manipulated. And without eliminating the uptick rule, they could not have started high-frequency trading. High-frequency trading is the super-fast computers. They can enter up to 90,000 trades, not shares, 90,000 individual trades in 1 second. There's no way that you or I can outdo these guys, okay? So, and they made fortunes in 2008 by short-selling the market and pushing stock prices down. Okay, so you could see just by how they changed the regulations what was going to be attempted. Same thing happened in 1990, which was the market top in Japan, in the Nikkei index. They also changed the rules in Japan under pressure of the U.S. State Department. They changed the rules about short selling. You couldn't sell short in Japan at that time, and they got Japan to change the rules on short selling. I said something is up. Yep. The Japanese stock market is heading for a big fall, and it was. It's still not, what is it, still down to 60% from where it was in 1990.
So Bert and I share something in common. We don't trust the media. Warren Buffett said it best. He says you need smart journalists to have a smart public. But we don't have that smart journalists. They're not around. They're a bunch of guys who just chase sensational, emotional messages. There's no in-depth to it. So before we went to break, I asked Bert this question. Some of the Kool-Aid the middle class has drank, and the middle class are the ones who are in trouble today. They bought the idea of go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, and invest for the long term in the stock market. And the stock, the Dow just went past 20,000. So my question to Bert is, because that's what he does, his forte is looking at the markets and understanding what's really going on underneath the the propaganda. So the question is, Bert, what would you say to somebody who drank the Kool-Aid, who actually believes what their financial planner has told them, the stock market goes up on average 8% per year, and it never crashes? What would you say to them?
Oh, it's totally untrue. And so if you believe in that, you're going to believe in Santa Claus probably as well. It is totally untrue that the market goes up 8% per year on average. On average, the old joke, that is, the economists always use average. There's an economist, he was going to walk to the other side of the river, and the guy says, well, you better be careful that you don't drown, The economist says, well, it has an average depth of only 4 feet. And so he started walking across and he drowned because at the deepest spot it was 10 feet deep. Okay, so the average is worthless. What people, I often get the question, what should people do with their money?
Wait, Bert, hang on.
Yeah.
Aren't most fund managers and most of these pension plan guys, they've based their forecast on 8%?
No, I don't. Not the smart ones.
Yeah, I know,
Not
but CalPERS, which is the largest public pension plan in America.
Oh, the big pension plans.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
they base it on 8%.
Liability. Yes, this is their liability. It's not what they think the market should do. It's what they have to do in order to meet the obligations to pay out the money to the retirees.
And
they have to make 8%. They're only making 2%. So they're running up these huge hundreds of billions of dollars of unfunded pension liabilities.
And that's
this
what
is a huge problem.
That's what I'm trying to get at here is that, with alternative facts and fake news out today, we don't know what to report. But for those of you going, well, why am I so stupid investing for the long term? Some of our biggest professional investors drank the Kool-Aid. Like if CalPERS was the biggest pension plan in America, public worker pension plan, is betting on 8%, and it's only 2%, the math doesn't work, does it, Bert?
No, it doesn't work. None of the math works. And this is why the only alternative has been for the central banks to create trillions of dollars or currencies, whatever currency they have in a country like the ECB in Europe and so on, to make up for it. And the thing is always, well, we have to get the economies going. No, they have to prevent a disaster in the financial system, in the financial markets. That's what it's really about. And that can only be done. Like when the central banks, in Europe, for example, they were buying from the banks everything except the kitchen sink. Originally, the European Central Bank was only allowed to buy governmental bonds from the banks. Okay, then they started buying corporate bonds. Then they started violating all of their rules and so on, basically to get all of the stuff that the banks could not get liquid, their own portfolio. They sold it to the European Central Bank, and that kept them afloat. So this is the big problem, that everybody's so underwater, and the only way they can keep the thing from collapsing is by creating all of this artificial money, which is what they call quantitative easing. We used to call it money printing, but that's a dirty word. So now they call it quantitative easing, which the average person doesn't even understand what it is.
Right. I have one more question, which is why for all of those of you who have drank the Kool-Aid, investing for the long term, and the Dow is at all-time highs, that's generally when it goes down. But there's another thing that Bert and I are watching is the escalation of debt. Is there an inevitable debt collapse in America coming?
The debt collapses occur periodically. It occurred in 2008, and that's what produces then the next round of artificial stimulation, which is the creation of even more artificial money than the last time around. And so eventually, this will create a very high inflationary situation where people don't want currency. They don't want to accept paper money. They will look for something else. And, traditionally over thousands of years, that has been gold or silver. And now, you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket. And I always tell the people that when government sees too much money going into gold as a way to protect themselves against the destruction of our currencies, they will just overnight suddenly come up with the solution to prevent people from going to gold. They will put a big tax, like a 70 or 80% tax on gold. And it's over. The game is gone. All the gold you've held for years and years and years suddenly won't be worth anything because you sell it, you got to pay huge taxes on any gains that you may have had. And that's how they will discourage gold ownership.
They've already made gold so expensive, as high as a capital gain tax ever. So that's why gold is not really. I have a lot of gold, but I don't see it as money or as an investment.
Exactly, and this is why we recommend the mining stocks. They're much safer from that perspective. So nowadays it's really the game is keep this thing going. Okay, and you've got the central bankers of the world. They're all in cahoots. They're all playing the same game, and it's being run by the BIS, which is Bank of International Settlements, in Basel, which is called the Central Bank of the Central Bankers, and so on. And, it's a long, long story, but there is nothing real anymore. Everything is smoke and mirrors. Like the stock market up move last year, throughout the year, we said, this is totally artificial. There is no sign of any investment buying in the stock market. Now we see the numbers for 2016, and they confirm exactly what we were noticing every day in the market. And yet last year, there was no investment buying of stocks. It was all stock buybacks or short covering. Well, those were the only two things that were causing stocks to go up.
So, Bert,
we're seeing it again.
Yeah,
we're seeing it again here in the last 4 weeks.
Bert, the reason I have you on the program is we got to talk to the average person. I'm kind of the average guy out here, and the reason I, subscribe to the Wellington Letter and all your other publications and services is because you're a teacher. And so all of you who are listening out here, some of the things Bert is saying is kind of over most people's heads because they've just been taught to invest for the long term in the stock market, buy, hold, pray, and lose. And I'm afraid you're going to lose if you keep following that process. Rich Dad Radio doesn't sell or endorse anything or anybody, and that includes Bert. All we're saying to you is right now, things are changing so quickly. Bert just sells information and years of experience and wisdom, and Rich Dad does the same thing. I'm really pumping hard right now because I am more concerned now than ever before because my friend Donald Trump is president, and I agree with Bert. Somebody is going to get him. They want to make sure he doesn't stay in power for very long. Something will happen. And so,
the extreme left here, they're even saying it, like these aging entertainers that we saw on TV. This one that said, I dream about blowing up the White House. I mean, they're talking about vicious attacks, about killing the president, blowing up the White House, and nobody says anything. If you or I would say that, the FBI would be at our doorsteps with an arrest warrant. And here these guys say it on a microphone from a stage.
To millions of people. To millions of people. To millions and millions of people.
And then they go around with these marches, with these obscene signs, with the F word, and they give it to their little 10-year-old kid to carry a sign with words that the kids don't even understand. I mean, what has the left become to? This is one recommendation I have to people. I said, focus not so much on your investments, keep it safe, but focus on saving the United States, because I tell you, the first step towards saving the United States was taken at the election time, because in spite of all the propaganda against Trump, he won. Americans showed, at least the informed Americans showed, we don't buy all the stuff that the media is telling us. All of these innuendos, Trump said this 20 or 30 years ago, he said this. People said that's not important. We need a successful businessman to run the country. People have been yearning for that for the last 40 years. They said, we need a businessman to make the decisions. We're tired of all the career politicians who only look at their own pocketbook, And, I mean, this is what happens. These politicians, these career politicians, they retire, and they're all worth $100 million or more. How do you get that on a salary of whatever they get, $160,000 a year? How do you get so wealthy?
Well,
so the thing that intelligent people should do now is hold the feet of the people in Congress to the fire and say, this is what we voted for. 60 million Americans voted for this man, and we demand that you support him. And all these guys that come on TV, like I don't even want to mention the names of these people, write them letters and say you are against what they stand for and so on. You want them to stand for Americans, not for their own special interests.
It's more than just America. It is for the world, because we're all connected right now. And
absolutely. But the United States is the most powerful thing. The United States sets the tone.
Right. But as you said right now, you keep raising that dollar, a lot of countries that owe us money will go bust. That's not good either. So that's why you have to pay attention today, because You and I don't have the power to change that. You and I have the power to stay educated and stay informed. So that's why I thank you, Bert. Thanks for expressing your point of view. Again, I want to reiterate, Rich Dad is not Democrat, Republican, liberal, or we'll keep an open mind as best possible. Listen to all sides. We're not religious in any ways. Support the freedom to choose religion or not. But this is really terrifying to me personally. What's happening is what Bert is saying is our country is actually being torn apart right now. So, Bert, I thank you very much, and for saying what you say, and for educating people so they can make their own informed choices and decisions. So, thank you, Bert.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert. It's basically, I find in my conversations, if you're talking to a group of intelligent people, they don't want to identify with Democrats or Republicans. I mean, I am neither, okay? And I think most people are like that. We are fed up with the two-party system because they're having the parties and they send us the bill.
Thanks, Bert.
We need people that are there for Americans.
Yeah, but
for this country.
But have you ever seen the country more divided?
No, I never have, and it's intentional.
I know.
Because when people are divided, it's much easier to control them.
And our special guest today was Bert Dohmen. Once again, his website is Dohmen Capital. His newsletter is the Wellington Report. I read it faithfully. It's one of the best we have. The other person we have is Richard Duncan, the Duncan Report. And so they come at it from different points of view of what's going on in the economy. So I've asked Bert to come back on because the next program I want to talk about is what he sees with Trump and Putin and China and what's going to happen there, because that's really the bigger news, is if Trump, cozies up to Russia, is he going to take on China? That could be, and that would be the biggest play of all. So we don't know what's going to happen, so Bert will be back, and so stay tuned to Rich Dad Radio. Again, we don't sell information, we don't recommend anything, but we do recommend you stay tuned because everything is going upside down. You can submit your questions to Ask Robert at richdadradio.com. As I said, Ask Robert is our most popular part of our show, so let's begin. Melissa, what's the first question for Ask Robert?
Our first question today comes from Ron in California. Favorite book, Midas Touch. Do you think Trump can balance the federal budget, or is the federal debt just too far out of control?
The answer is I sincerely doubt it. If you listen to what he said, Trump's claim to fame is he doesn't pay taxes, as he said in his debate with Hillary when she attacked him for saying, you don't pay tax. He says, because I'm smart. Now, you should pay attention to that one. I mean, if he's smart, he doesn't pay taxes. Why are you paying taxes? Does that mean you're stupid? And the second thing is says, I am the king of debt. I love debt. But he says debt is dangerous. So will he get us out of debt? I don't think so, but he'll probably use debt more wisely than the last characters we've had. So as you know, at the Rich Dad Radio Show, I love debt, but there's good debt and bad debt. And there's debt that makes you rich and debt that makes you poor. And most people, when they say cut up your credit cards or live debt-free, they're talking about bad debt, not good debt. It takes financial education to use good debt. On top of that, when you use debt, you get tax breaks. So the reason Donald and I use debt and we don't pay tax is because we use debt. But without financial education in our schools, we have people that actually think paying taxes is patriotic. I mean, what a bunch that is. And also debt is bad. I mean, that's how stupid most of our leaders are. And I do mean financially stupid. They may be highly educated academic geniuses, Harvard graduates, but they know nothing about money. So watch Trump. He doesn't pay tax and he loves debt. So what's going to happen? Who knows? Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Alex in New York City. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. What recommendations may you have for the millennial generation?
Well, the millennial generation's screwed, And, well, there's a reason. I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean, I say that to shake you up. One of the things we say at Rich Dad is choose your teachers wisely. The baby boom generation, which I'm a part of, I'm the last generation of the industrial age. And then the millennial is the first generation of the information age. And the industrial age and the information age are polar opposites. It's like north and south, east and west. They're not the same. So if you're a millennial, you have skills and talents and gifts that my generation never had. For instance, I am a Technosaurus Rex. I barely use my cell phone, but you guys were born into it. It is part of your culture. The other thing is the industrial age was the idea of job security. Millennials don't have that. So that's why for millennials, the advantages are really good if you choose your teachers wisely. Don't listen to old guys who tell you to go to school and get a job and invest in a 401k, get out of debt and save money. That's industrial age information. So the millennial generation has more opportunity than ever before, but you're screwed if you listen to old people like me who still don't know how to use a cell phone. I'm going to the Apple store today at 1 o'clock to get lessons on an iPad. That's how bad and behind the time I am. But it's not second nature to me. I don't understand technology. So the millennial generation, you're screwed if you listen to old guys like me. You got to find out new teachers and new people to listen to. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Jacob in Des Moines, Iowa. Favorite book, Cash Flow Quadrant. He says, when you say the government confiscates your gold, do they take it without giving you any money for it, or do they reimburse you with the current price of gold?
From what I understand of that period, it was around 1930 that FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, changed it. He changed the rules on gold because they want to control money. And I believe at that time gold was about $20 an ounce. He didn't really confiscate it, but they said they did. But he never confiscated anything as far as I know. Could be wrong. What he did was then, as people did voluntarily turn in their gold, like sheep, they turned it in. And then what he did was he changed the price of gold from $20 to $35. So he basically screwed anybody who was a sheep going in there to do as they're told. So they couldn't confiscate it anyway. You know, what are they going to do? Track them down? They're going to track down the immigrants? You know, you got gold in your pocket? You know, I mean, how are they going to know? You're going to hide it in your backyard? Just don't keep it in a bank. That's where they can catch you. But I don't think, I'm possibly wrong, but they're just threatening that because they don't want you to shift from dollars, which is paper currency. Remember this, all currencies, which is the U.S. dollar, the euro, the yen, ultimately go to their true value, which is zero. Throughout history, the Chinese were the first to print money on paper. It went to zero. The Reichsmark during Germany's time went to zero. You know, the Confederate dollar went to zero. All printed currencies ultimately go to zero. The question is, what are we going to next? So I don't think the dollar will be here much longer. What's going to replace it? I don't know. So that's why you've got to be careful. Be careful who you listen to and do your own thinking. Final question, Melissa.
Our last question comes from Oliver in California. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. When do you think the U.S. will do away with the dollar, and what, in your opinion, will replace it?
Well, that's kind of the last question. I don't have any idea with that. I'm just not going to hang around. There's a guy named James Rickards who we have on our program also, and he has an even more foreboding forecast. Bert disagrees with him. A lot of people disagree with Rickards. But Rickards' track record and his experience base is Class A. It's prime, the best of ever, super prime. He was at LTCM, Long-Term Capital Management. He's worked for the Pentagon on currency wars, his book Currency Wars. And his last book, The Road to Ruin, he says, what happened in 2008 when the markets crashed, the Fed and central banks printed money. His prediction is what is going to happen next is that, let's say the crash comes in 2020, 2018. They're not going to they're not going to let you take your money out. They're going to shut down the money supply. So it's going to be not like the U.S. Next crash is going to be like Cyprus, where there was a bail-in, where they lock you away for your money. You cannot redeem your money. Now, you can say, oh, that'll never happen in the States, but it just happened in India. You know, Modi, the prime minister, just said, you can't use so many, I think these rupee, whatever it is, you can't use this paper money. They're going to try and suck it up, draw it out. Larry Summers proposed taking the $100 U.S. bill out of circulation. So something is going on. Bert disagrees with what Rickards says, but Rickards' book, The Road to Ruin, is worth reading Because if he is accurate, that what the United States pulls off is a Cyprus, where you as a depositor with your money, what you go up there, they say, I'm sorry, you can't get your money. What do you do then? I think that'll be the intermediate step, a possible one. I'm not saying it's going to go happen. But the reason I thank you guys for listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show and being part of the Rich Dad family is our job here is to do our best to give you ideas and the latest thoughts from the future, not from the past. I think one of the biggest people that are in the biggest trouble are my generation, the baby boomers, who have an education, who think they're educated, but they have no financial education. And that old saying, insanity is doing the same old thing, expecting things to change. And many of my peers are saving money. They're invested for the long term in the stock market, and they're sending their kids to school, coming out with tons of student loan debt, and there's no jobs. So that's really why we have the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're kind of the antichrist to traditional, because as I said to that person, the millennials are kind of screwed because they were born in the information age, not the industrial age.